We'll start. Okay, good morning. I have the pleasure of speaking with Ben Longshore, who is a terrific appraiser. And Ben, thank you for taking the time to do this. Um,
Pleasure to be here.
yeah, no. And again, the goal is, I'm not sure if anybody's going to jump in or not, is to finally ask an appraiser anything that you wanted to ask and were afraid. But Ben, I'll let you start your presentation. If anybody jumps in at any point, we will see and see what's
Okay.
going on. But go ahead.
Um, so I'll just start out first with a personal background. I'm a Santa Clarita native, went to Canyon High School, graduated from Canyon High School, got an associate's from COC, and then finished out of state. I actually played football in college. So just took me where a scholarship got me and graduated with my bachelor's in communication. My associate's was in recreation management. I wanted to get in. As I said, I played football, so I'm heavily involved in sports and
Okay.
recreation, and um, that's really my interests and hobbies and passion. I like coaching football, basketball, um, just watching kids get better, grow their skills. As far as I have two kids of my own, so my son's playing flag football right now, and it's fun to watch him and his teammates each and every week. They're six, so each and every week learn the rules of the game, get better, grow confidence when they pull the ball carrier's flag. But so that's a little bit about me. I graduated from there with a bachelor's in communication. I think I said that. And started working with Northwestern Mutual in the on the insurance side of the insurance world, and um, liked it. Felt a little bit like a fish out of water just because my degree was communication. I kind of wanted to see, if I could get into broadcasting or, sports marketing or somewhere in that avenue, in that field. And Northwestern Mutual is heavily involved with collegiate sports. So it was like a happy marriage, but I was doing okay and just kind of thinking, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? And then I thought about appraising. No, I don't think anyone has that thought, but um, I was working there, and my mom is a real estate appraiser. Many agents, if they watch this, have probably met her if they've worked anywhere in Southern California, but especially out here in Santa Clarita in the Valley, Deanne Longshore. Her and my dad got into the business about 30 years ago. I guess 35 now. These last 2 or 3 years flew by, so I guess I better start
Correct.
readjusting
Yeah.
my timeline. So about 35 years ago, started a little bit before I was born, and they experienced, all the growing pains in the appraisal industry as far as 30 years ago. You just had to sign a piece of paper and get out there and do what somebody told you, I guess. But it's gotten, as everyone knows, much more regulated, much more stringent on requirements, and which I think is a good thing. I think it's um, good to keep people in line and have everyone on the same page as far as practices and principles, and especially when it comes to valuing people's most valuable asset in most cases. Um, so my parents got into appraising. My grandfather was actually an appraiser. Technically, I guess I'm a third generation appraiser. Shows that we're super exciting people. But it's been good. It's a very steady. It's very cyclical and steady. You can stay as busy as you want, as long as you want, or you can take time off. That's the good flexibility of the profession, and kind of what appealed to me when I was first thinking what I wanted to do once I got out of college. So, anyways, my mom called me while I was working at Northwestern Mutual, said she was swamped, said the average age of appraiser keeps climbing, doesn't get any younger, which I'm sure most people have noticed. So
Hmm.
she asked just for some help. She didn't want to pull me away from that because I was having some success in that industry, but she just let me know that there was potential for growth and in the appraisal world, and that it needed younger generations to start backfilling when people were retiring or moving on from the profession. So we were in Utah. We moved back out to California at the time. Um, and I got into appraising. I mainly just helped her in the office, just clerical and bookkeeping assignments, things like that.
Did we lose you?
Potential for
Hmm.
growth and ability as far as um, goals financially I wanted to set or professionally where I wanted to be and things like that. So I dove in, and I guess that'll be just kind of the first. I'll just jump into the profession in general, and then looks like there's one more person that hopped in. So I guess if
Great.
Dan or Myra have any questions, they could ask at that point. But
Sure.
just to get into the profession, I think is what at least most people are curious about. Um, I have Instagram and I've seen TikTok videos, and I know there's lots of fact finding that happens the first 5 minutes of the appraisal. We show up and the typical questions: How long have you been doing this? Are you from the area? Do you know the area? Um, just kind of building the rapport, but also making sure the person that's showing up at your house is the appraiser. We've all heard some horror stories about just random people showing up at appointments, but yeah, so there's four degrees in the appraising industry, or four levels. For anyone that wants to get in, you start in at the trainee level. Um, and I'll go over how I got into the industry because I feel like I got shafted just a little bit. after I after I got certified, they lowered the requirements here in California. California has um, kind of the highest level of entry as far as appraisers go. Other parts of the country, they're desperately hiring people just because people are aging out, and it's not an attractive profession. It's very
Hmm. So we got some technical difficulties. We might have lost Ben over there. Let's see what happened.
very um,
We
then it's a
keep
good thing.
you get keep cut off. Something.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's just heads up on that. You got cut
okay.
off. Not sure what you said last, but go ahead.
Let's see. Well, so yeah, there's trainees,
Okay.
um, which now in the profession, I think it's pretty easy to get in as a
Mm.
trainee as far as requirements go. Um, sometimes they'll even take you as long as you just get basic classes down. You don't even need to do a full 75 hours of classes or um, certain requirements, just because the need for help in the appraisal industry is so high.
Okay.
And obviously, the need to grow the number of appraisers is high too. I tried to look up statistics yesterday with the pandemic. You know, in some areas, people just kind of disappear because they, you know, turn away more work than they actually accept every day. But it's right under 40,000 appraisers nationally. So
Wow.
um, very, very small community as far as appraisers go. I think there's many more realtors just in California and probably LA County, but
In LA County, yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah. So there's trainees, and then the next licensing level is actually um, a licensed appraiser, which in California doesn't get you a whole lot, just because the thresholds for appraising are pretty low. I think the threshold is you're not allowed to appraise anything over $1 million. You're not allowed to do any multi-unit properties. There's certain restrictions. Now, if you have a certified appraiser, which is the third level, which is what most appraisers in Santa Clarita are, myself included. Um, if you have a certified appraiser, they can sign off on an appraisal. If you get an assignment, say it's for a refinance in Sand Canyon, you didn't know that the house was going to be worth 1.5, 1.6. Um, you bring on a certified appraiser just for liability purposes, and mainly if the lender wants to sell the loan, if someone does their due diligence, they'll see that it was just a licensed appraiser. Um, so the risk score of that appraisal, I don't know if it goes up or down. I can't remember the metric that they use, but on a
Mhm.
score of 1 to 5, it's whatever the lowest is. Um, yeah, so there's certified appraisers, and then there's general appraisers, which are the commercial land appraisers. Um, and just a helpful tidbit, if you ever need an appraiser, if you get a property or a sale out in a rural area, um, the governing body of California for appraisers is the Bureau of Real Estate Appraisers. Um, pretty, pretty typical standard government name. If it's hard to remember, you can type in Brea in Google, and below the city of Brea, then
Mhm.
the governing board of appraisers is there. But it's the Bureau of Real Estate Appraisers. You can go on their website. You can find any appraiser. So whatever zip code you're working in, you can look for a certified appraiser, or if it's a land sale out in the middle of nowhere, you'll need a general appraiser. And you can fiddle with different licensing levels and punch in the zip code, and a list of appraisers will come out in that area. That's actually a question I get a lot. When people come across my website, they either call for random appraisal of fine art, and I
Hmm.
have to tell them, sorry, I don't do that. Or it's someone looking for an appraisal in a hard area where there aren't many appraisers, or it's just a tough assignment, so it requires someone who's done a few of those before. Um, so the Bureau of Real Estate Appraisers is a great reference as far as if you have any questions about who the person you're working with is, who they say they are. You can always type in that person's name, see how long they've been working in the profession, the classes they've taken, if their license is um, current and valid. So that's a great tool, and get that question actually quite a bit, probably 4 or 5 times a month, either from the general public or from realtors that are just looking for references in difficult areas. Um, so yeah, there's trainee, licensed, certified, general. Most residential appraisers in California that you meet are either certified appraisers, or they're the trainee of the certified appraiser. Just
Got it.
um, especially with the pandemic, a lot of flexibilities were introduced, and so there are a lot more trainees out there. It is tough. A lot of them are asked to kind of be interns or take very little pay for pretty detailed work, I would say. Am I cutting out? You're looking
No,
fizzy,
no,
but
we can hear you
okay.
perfectly now.
Okay.
No problem.
Um, yeah, so I'm trying to think. So one thing I really kind of envy of realtors and the profession, uh, for realtors and agents in general, is the National Association of Realtors. I feel like, and I'm sure everyone has differing opinions on that, but um, there's camaraderie and um, just kind of national standards and practices as far as appraisers go. We're very much on our own. I think
Oh,
that's,
wow.
yeah, part of the reason why I think appraisers have the reputation of being salty or closed off or not willing to talk with any of it. It's because we are just kind of on our own. If we have questions, we go to the forums. There's forums online
Sure.
where usually you just get older retired appraiser trolls just telling you do better. Um, so it is tough in that regard. The number of appraisers is so much smaller, and um, there's no real national organization that kind of looks out and has the
Hmm.
back of appraisers. There's the appraisal subcommittee, which is the um, I guess, sort of the regulating arm of the government, but um, not a lot of appraisers are actually on the board. And
Got it.
so it is tough. I mean, everyone's got an idea or a proposition to improve the profession. And a lot of times we're not included in those,
Yeah.
um, which, I think it will change just because over the next decade, you know, I think it's like 60 to 70% of the profession will be over 60 years old. So um, there is a need for new ideas, new blood, um, and just appraiser input of how do we get people in to the profession? How do we keep them here? How do we keep them excited? Um, because as I'm sure as agents can relate, it can be pretty stressful. People can get pretty mad at you. Um, but I think that's why it would be good to have a national just camaraderie, I guess. So we could bounce ideas off of each other and I think just talk about funny stories and just kind of decompress, especially with the pandemic and everyone's anxiety levels heightened over the last 2 years. I think that's what most appraisers and people just need is an outlet to
Sure.
kind of let loose. So, um, and then I'll stop now if you have immediate questions, or I have a couple more points I can jump
Myra, do you
on.
have
I
any
don't know.
questions? Or
Well, I have a question regarding the appraise over the database that appraiser is using now. Um,
interesting. Yeah.
Okay,
Good
like
question.
the okay, and that's something I wish would change. There's so Fannie Mae has the collateral underwriter that kind of aggregates every report that Fannie Mae purchases, which is, in California, it would be very nice to have because it'd be pretty much everything. Um, that logs everything, how an appraiser grades a property, whether it's average, good, excellent, um, certain adjustments they make. That has all that information, and that's how they grade appraisals that come through on a score of 1 to 5 um, of the risk level of like, five. I think it's 5 is like very good, a competent, detailed report, and 1 is like fraud. You should
Mhm.
not invest in this loan. You should probably turn this appraiser in. Um, so there's the collateral underwriter that kind of keeps us in line. But as far as data that we have access to and information to, we use the MLS and CoreLogic um, and Realist, I think, is what's available on the MLS. So we have access to that. I use a software called Parcel Quest that just deals primarily with tax records, sales, um, kind of loan amounts on record. So it kind of supplements Realist, especially like the height of 2020 and 2021 when things were just moving so fast. And I needed, if something closed last week, for some reason, the sales we use have to be verified.
Right.
However, an appraiser can get them verified, um, then they can use them in their report. So speed was something that we were really struggling with getting. There was just a backlog of recordings because people weren't in the office because of COVID or whatever the reason was. It was taking 10 days to 14 days for a recording to be documented, and for us to have access to that information, which you know last year that could mean an extra $10,000 just
Sure.
as far as time goes. So um, as far as the sale goes, so I use a Realist, um, Parcel Quest is for my tax information. The assessor's website sometimes is actually faster than both of those. So I do LA County assessor, or if I'm out in a different area, just whatever assessor corresponds to where I am. I primarily work out here in LA County. Um, so for information, that's where we go. As far as software that appraisers can use to kind of pile a report together, there's really one major one. It's called Total a la Mode that has all of our forms, and they're really trying to get into the tech space. As I said, the appraisal industry um, is you know a dinosaur of
Yeah.
sorts. It's really hard to integrate the technology just because sales have to be verified, condition has to be verified. um, I think as much as society and the industry wants appraisals to be faster and cheaper. I had this thought, you can have fast or you can have faster, or you can have cheaper, but you can't have both as far as appraising, just because there is so much work involved. So sorry, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. So total for appraisers is kind of where we keep all of our forms. There's a few other companies, but essentially they all kind of do the same thing. There's forms on the website. You set up the form. You can import the information from. I use Parcel Quest, like I said, because it fills out the forms I need a little bit better and saves me a little bit of time. But in the past, most of the older appraisers have used to just doing it by hand. They print out the sheet and do it by hand. They just feel more comfortable that way. It's totally up to preference. So I think that's what you were kind of asking as far as what we use as far as technology and data. And they're, each and every month, each and every week, there's a new company that says they're revolutionizing the appraisal industry.
Of course.
But they just kind of take someone else's idea and do it not as well. So I don't know how to better put it. But I think, over the next few years, there definitely could be ways to quicken the process and possibly make it cheaper. But I think that would need to come by way of regulation and scaling back kind of liability on the appraiser, because many appraisers don't want to sign off on a value if they don't see the property, if they don't see the comparables. So if there was just a way, and I think it would need to be a collaborative entire industry effort, by way of realtors, assessors, brokers, to get just proper information into the system that's more
Yeah.
reliable.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure many of you have come across either sales in the MLS that haven't closed, that closed for much less, or closed for much more. The square footage is off. So um, that's one thing that could potentially slow an appraiser down. If you're in Silmar or San Fernando, and they have the tax assessor square footage, but they've built the ADU, the junior ADU. There's a lot of that doesn't meet the eye when you're just looking at the listing.
Mhm.
That's potentially what slows it down. Out here in Santa Clarita, everything's still pretty cookie cutter, as they say. So pretty much what you see is what you get. But sometimes, you get pressure from the seller to include their sunroom or the square footage of their bonus room that they made in their 3-car garage or something, that just kind of throws that data off. So I don't know if that answered your question, but for technology, it is um, pretty ancient, I guess you would say, for what we use to fill out the appraisal. And I think until things are much cleaner, much more verified, and everyone's on the same page, it can't totally speed up without it being more expensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Questions for
Was that
you.
your question? Sorry, I don't know if I hit it or not.
No,
I
no.
wanna know. I wanna know. How no. How many Maya around the property you take in consideration to do
Oh,
That's a
the
very good
value?
question, Myra.
yeah,
That's an excellent question.
yeah. And I know agents hate to hear it because they want black and white answers, yes or no, but it's subjective to every appraisal. And one example, I hope everyone's local out here, but one example I think of vividly in my mind, Fair Oaks is kind of getting to that, to what I'm thinking of, but the Valencia area with Granary Square, the Summit, and over by Vista Valencia, those used to be like 3 distinct neighborhoods, and you would stay within a mile or sometimes even a half mile. But with the amount of sales being so low, and demand so high, as many of you know, our parameters go out quite a bit. Rule of thumb is a mile, but um, in some areas like Sand Canyon, you use the entire canyon back there. So,
Mm,
so it can be 2 to 3 miles depending on how far up or how far towards the 14 they are or back in the canyon. And if these are examples, if people are from out of area, I apologize. But like horse properties, for example,
right.
Acton, Agua Dulce, and there's a few down in Silmar, Porter Ranch, places like that. The properties, the lots are larger, so the 1 mile rule doesn't really apply out there. You're just trying to compare apples to apples, horse property to horse property. And you really kind of have to piece it together because there might only be one horse property that is sold that can help you show the value of what horse equipment or stalls or barns are worth, and then you need to find a property with similar square footage and then make the
Mm,
adjustment for what it doesn't have. So there really is, and this is one thing I did want to touch on. So great question. Um,
yeah.
in becoming an appraiser, we get this big picture of the parameters that we can work in. And there's a lot of leniency and just whatever we feel is right for that property. Um, and then once you get into the lending business, especially regarding sales, the lender wants you to work in a smaller subset of that. And then even like Fannie Mae, and depending on the lender, they want you to like
Mm,
hole in the sale. So, with all the tools, knowledge, experience that we have at our disposal, it's really hard kind of pinholing some of these properties and knowing exactly what they're looking for. Um, you know, that's why sometimes it's really people scratch their head and they're like, why did they include, say you have a property that's 1,500 square feet. Um, and there's 5 sales that are 1,499 square feet that are the same bedroom and bathroom count. Um, some lenders, so you could include, all of those, and the value's the same on all of them. If they're all $500,000, that means your property is probably worth $500,000. But when you submit it to the lender, they say, please include one sale that brackets the square footage. So even though these are only a square foot off, it's probably just a recording error. They're all probably the same exact model. They want us to include a property that has more square.
got it. Looks like you're getting cut off again. Yeah.
So
Hang on.
these 5 sales, yeah. Oh, sorry. So they want us to bracket the square footage. So even though we have these 5 sales at 1,499 square feet and we're 1,500 square feet,
Yeah.
the next available sale in the area, say, is like 1,800 square feet. We have to include it and just
Oh,
say, yeah, the lender asked that we bracket this sale, even though it doesn't reflect what buyers are paying for 1,500 square foot home. So a lot of times if there's like an odd comparable included in the report, um, you can kind of see like, oh, they needed the lot size bracketed, they needed the square footage bracketed, and
mm,
that's just something that lenders need as far as teaching their underwriters what to look for, what's good in an appraisal, and that just like pigeonholes us. Because everything we learn about is you should pick the most comparable
right.
and readily available, whereas the lender wants us to kind of bracket everything. So you have to learn how to operate in that um, tiny bit of what they let you do. So there really is, to answer your question, there is no 1 mile radius, especially with inventory so low. But a lot of times, what I see happen with agents in the market in general, um, they'll hit a sales price. They'll get someone to offer 100,000 over asking, and
Right.
there's nothing in their immediate area, and they try and pull from outside. Um, say it's at 1.01 miles away. Um, they'll try and ask us to include it, which we could, but we just can't ignore it. If there's 10 sales within a quarter mile of us, we can't ignore all 10 of those just because of the price.
Sure.
Because what the buyers are dictating is this is the specific price range we're willing to pay to live here. 1.01 miles away could be a different um, neighborhood.
Right.
So it really is subjective. It's hard to say yes 1 mile, but if sales are so low, we could go, as long as the property's in a Valencia zip code, we could go all over Valencia. But typically, if there are sales within a 1 mile radius, we try and stay in that. If we go
So
outside, we
besides that,
explain why we went outside.
yeah, besides, let me interrupt. Besides the 1 mile radius or how far back do you go nowadays? Because sales are so low. I know traditionally 6 months or less, but
Right.
how far back would you go, or should you go, especially if you're an agent preparing for a listing appointment? How
hmm
far back should you go realistically?
Um, that's a good question. Uh, 90 days is ideal.
Okay,
If there is data to support a market value within the past 90 days, that's as far back as we go. 6 months is what we were taught. Like,
right,
6 months, market's pretty stagnant or stable.
right,
Um, Obviously, the last 2 years have been historic, but
crazy.
uh, yeah, it depends on the property. Like the high dollar homes, anything over, I'd say 1.2, 1.3 million. Values don't see the sharp, drastic turn that they do. Sometimes they do, but you could go back to a year. The more unique the property is, the further back in time you could go just to find a
Gotcha.
similar property. Again, like I said, we're trying to compare apples to apples. So if in the last 90 days there's no houses that are like ours, we need to find at least one that is like ours. So we can check those boxes in the appraisal. Like, yes, we found a 2-story home. Yes, the lot size is similar, utility is similar, has a view. Um, I guess like whatever you think is the major selling point of the home,
Mm,
whether it's square footage, location, we go back as far as we need to find that. And then if there is a time adjustment, like we look at the area as a whole over the last year, and it splits into like three. So uh, 6 to 12 months would be one category, uh, and then the last two are 90-day increments. So the most recent 90 days and then up to 6 months. So 90 days, 6 months, and then everything for the last year.
got it.
And we kind of identify if the market has continued to go up. Um, what I am seeing, and I think it's just people are exhausted, but in a lot of neighborhoods now, it's kind of flattening.
Right.
Um, Values are still going up, but people were paying astronomical prices. The market jumped. There's a huge jump between the 6 month, the 6 to 12 month range, and the 3 to 6 month range. The values jumped a ton, but then they kind of stayed there. Um, so yeah, we can go back as far as 12 months. It hasn't happened in a while, but sometimes you can go back further if you need to. But then you definitely need a time adjustment in the appraisal. And that doesn't happen too often. More the rural properties, if you have a rural
Hmm.
property,
Sure.
um, or just like unique, like if it's back tucked deep into a canyon somewhere, then yeah, you could go further back.
What is the difference in the city and the in town regarding the radio for comps?
Um, like LA, like with high density, like high rises, or just the city as far as
For example, we are living in an Antelope Valley where we have unincorporated areas.
uh-huh.
So from Pandel to the Little Rock or Lake Los Angeles. So
Okay.
what is the difference in radio that I have to get to compare in a home for getting a listed price?
Good
Um,
question.
yeah, out there, a lot of times it's zip code. So anything in the zip code
Oh,
will do. So if you're out in Little Rock or Lake Los Angeles, pretty much. So if you're in Lake Los Angeles, any sale in Lake Los Angeles is comparable to one another, just because it's so far removed from
Mm,
the Antelope Valley that anyone who moves to Lake Los Angeles is happy living anywhere in Lake Los Angeles. Whereas, if you go down into Palmdale, the closer you are to the golf course, there's a premium in pricing, or the closer you are to the mountains, there's a premium in pricing. Um, but those like Little Rock, Lake Los Angeles, um, Antelope Acres, or I
Yeah,
believe it's called,
yeah,
and
it's
Rosemead.
out there.
Yeah,
Yeah. So with those,
yeah,
you would use the zip codes on those type of rural properties.
yeah. Zip codes and neighboring zip codes
Gotcha.
sometimes, just because out there, sometimes there are properties like when you get close to the Palmdale Lancaster line,
Sure.
you're closer to, if you're in Palmdale, you're closer to Lancaster or Quartz Hill than you are to other properties in Palmdale. So
Right.
it just depends. That's where Antelope Valley is unique, just because builders come in, build, anywhere up to 40 units, and then they stop for 10 years, and then the next builder comes in. Um, so there's a lot of leeway of what an appraiser can pick.
Hmm.
Like I said, they can't ignore sales that are the same year built within 5 blocks of you.
Sure.
Just very commonsensical way of thinking. But
So to
does
build
that
to
answer your
build on
question, or
what
you have?
Myra was saying, yeah, to build on what Myra was saying, if we're looking at zip codes, let's stay with that for example, because the three of us do a lot of sales in Antelope Valley and so forth. But let's pick, for example, Little Rock. If we're looking at Little
Right.
Rock, and let's say Myra is taking a listing, and the property is 2 acre. Let's say it's a small 1,800 square foot home, but the other recent sales in the area that have the same lot size, let's say, are in the 2,300, 2,500. How do you adjust that if you can adjust that, or do you need to go somewhere else to find an 1,800
Yeah.
square foot home?
That's that's a lot of where the lender requests of bracketing come in.
Sure,
Ideally, you want to find a property that's the same square footage.
sure.
Out there, you wouldn't run into what's called as over improvement. Here in Santa Clarita, you would. Like my mom lives near Central Park.
Okay,
I forget the track, but she's right behind the pipe by Saugus High School.
right.
Um, all the homes are
Centurion,
what?
Centurion.
Yeah, yeah. All the homes are single level homes,
Right.
1,200 to 1,300 square feet. And there was a guy around the block that built like a 3-story,
Oh
3,000
boy.
square foot home. That would be considered an over improvement because people trying to buy in that neighborhood are trying to buy a 12 to 1,300 square foot home. The people that are
Right,
looking for 3,000 square foot homes are going to go north of Copper Hill.
right.
But out in places in Antelope Valley where the square footage might be hard, um, there wouldn't be necessarily what's an over improvement. We would just go as far as we need to find a sale that's similar size, or go as far back, like you mentioned earlier, the 12-month
Hmm.
rule. We would go back to find something of similar square footage. It is really it is really tough out there.
Yeah,
Um, and out like Acton, out to Lake Los Angeles, Little Rock, out there. The use codes of the property, like some of them are manufactured homes, some of them
right.
are mobile homes on these 2 to 3 acres. So the quality of the build factors in too. So you got to take a look at that. Sometimes there was one I did, Pear Blossom. The use code of the property was a manufactured home, and they put like 4 units on there. So it was like 2,000 square feet, but then they built a guest house, a stick built guest house. They had horse stalls, they had an underground bunker. So there were lots of things outside of the actual property that
Sure.
attributed to the value. Um, so yeah, out there, there's a lot more leeway. I would say if you're going to give an appraiser comps, and this, I guess, has answers questions that people want to ask us but don't. If you're going to print out comps, just hand them to them. Just because a lot of it, I don't know how to properly word it, but um, you just want it to be as non-intrusive as possible, just because if you're trying to tell them why it's worth this, it might pull them back and not even bother looking at those. So if you just hand them, hey, I printed this out, you can use it when you need to. They're much more likely to look at it because you're being respectful of their time, their
Sure.
expertise, the work they put in before they got out there.
Sure.
properties out there, you spend probably 30 minutes to an hour just researching the area and the sales. So time-wise, they've already invested a lot. So for you to sit there, say, here's why I printed this one out. This is why we're, to go over 5 or
Sure.
6, it's frustrating because we're creatures of habit. Like when I'm pretty flexible when I show up. If someone wants me to start outside the house, I can do that. If they want me to start inside the house, I can do that. I can talk while I'm doing it, as long as the angles of the house aren't weird. But there are appraisers out there where it's very much a process. They want to start in the front door. They want to go right in the house, go around the house, and finish back at the front door. So anything you do to kind of throw them off might irritate them, but at the very least, their brain's not functioning like they've learned to over the past 2 to 3 decades. So,
Sure.
um, so if it's something like that, just hand them this, and you can write on the sheet of paper why you thought that would be a good comp. But to sit there and take 5 to 10 minutes before they even start looking at it um, would throw them off, but might upset some of them too.
Mm.
Me, I don't mind. I feel like I'm a pretty personable guy, so um, but it does, even myself, it does throw me off a little bit if I'm like, this is
Sure.
going to be a hard assignment, and I'm like focused by the time I get in there, and then the agent says, here, look at these for a minute, and then my brain gets jumbled. So
Sure.
um, I forgot what the question was. Did someone
So we
did
got
that
5
answer it?
minutes left.
Okay.
Feel free to ask more questions. I think you might have had a point or two you still wanted to add. That
Yeah, if someone has a immediate question on something they're doing, then they can ask it. If not, I have like 4 or 5
okay.
bullet points.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. And just so you can see into the mind of the appraiser, the theme of this was, what are questions you want to ask but are too afraid. Um, a lot is just about the appraisal industry. Um, some people aren't afraid to ask, but they're like, oh, how many are you doing today? How many do you do in a week? What do you make on them? So I will peel back the curtain a little just for transparency, and so people know that it can be rewarding, but it is a lot of work. So typically, on average, throughout the year, I would say an appraiser that's not difficult to deal with, that has their head on straight, will have anywhere from 8 to 20 orders a week, depending on summertime. It gets to 20, and things get very hectic. Um, but on average, depending on how many they accept, what kind of assignments they accept, um, anywhere from 8 to 20. Some take even more, but that means that they have people helping them. I think I've kind of maxed it out as I like to split my day up as doing inspections in the morning and typing in the afternoon.
Mm.
Obviously, people's schedules don't always line up with that. Um, but if I can plan it correctly, and that's a lot of gripe agents have, is appraisers will show up when they want, how they want, and will request times that don't really work for them, for the agent. But we're trying to, if we have 20 orders we need to schedule in a week, we need to, you know, on Monday I'm going to be in Palmdale, and Tuesday I'm going to be in Newhall, and Wednesday I'm going to be in Valencia, Thursday Porter Ranch, Friday I'm answering emails and submitting reports before the end of the week is over. Um, so I try and structure it to where I can do, 2 to 3 inspections in the morning, and I can have 2 to 3 appraisals typed up in the afternoon. Um, and anything more than that. So I would say if a person worked 8 to 10 hours in a day, they could probably cork out 6 appraisals that are decent quality. But that would mean they didn't go out and look at any properties, which some appraisers do that. They'll do all their inspections on certain days of the week, and then other days of the week they type it up. It just depends how they want to structure their business. Um, but so yeah, so we can do anywhere from 1 to 3 inspections, unless we have an inspection day that's devoted primarily to inspections. And I've heard of people doing 8 to 10 inspections. So
Jeez.
yeah, as far as pricing for the appraisal goes, that's where I said I wish appraisers were united like realtors, so fees and everything were very transparent. In some states, they do have transparency laws where if a borrower pays $600 for an appraisal, they get to see how much of that actually gets to the appraiser. Because the way
Ben,
it's
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but the software is going to kick us off in about a minute.
okay.
What's the best way for the agents to get a hold of you if they have any questions or would like to hire your services, or how do they get a hold of you?
So am I cutting off? We're good still.
About
So you can
10:50 is going to cut us off automatically. So
okay. Um, info at bensappraisal.com. I try and keep it simple for people to find me. My business is just called Ben's Appraisal. You can look up my website or email me. My phone number's on there as well, but that's probably the easiest way to get in contact with me.
okay, and I would highly recommend Ben. Again, if you guys, gals, have any questions, he can help.